Awesome. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have another episode of the Manual Save podcast here today. Joined again by Justin Connors, creative director and founder of 8 Prime Esports, as well as Juan Rodriguez, a CPA who works with streamers and esports athletes and other video game professionals, and founder of Lodgz Financials.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Dude, I feel like we've been trying to get on each other's shows for about a year now. And it's just one of those things where like timing never lines up. It's always difficult in life.
Thankfully this worked out, but yeah, I feel like prior to this, it's been a bit of a hassle.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what it is you do? Because I feel like when I say the word CPA, people's eyes just kind of gloss over and they're like, what is that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So primarily, like you were saying, I work with streamers. Is kind of like my bread and butter. And so as a CPA for them, I'll help them throughout the year. Or I'll have 2 different kinds of clients. Usually if it's a client that I work with throughout the year, then I'll help them with like bookkeeping, document retention, tax planning, estimated quarterly tax payments, their tax filing at year end. And basically help them with all things personal finance related. I don't do any investments or anything like that, but basically keeping them organized throughout the year, making sure they've got good systems in place, and then making sure that they're staying tax compliant. And then in additional to that, I'll also help them a little bit with, I don't like do LLC setups or anything, as you know, John, but I'll help them kind of consult and be like, here are the benefits. Here's what maybe you should consider of how to set up your streaming entity, and give them a little bit of consultation on that. And then the same thing with banking. Obviously, I don't do banking because I'm not a banker, but I have some banks that I do private banking with, and will oftentimes introduce clients to them, kind of explain the benefits of that. Why should they have a banker that understands, their income stream, their revenue stream, and things like that. And then, oftentimes too, introducing them to lawyers or anyone else in the space that I'm connected with that I think could be beneficial to them. I'll make those intros as appropriate. So obviously this is a busy time of year for me right now with taxes, but throughout the year, it could be different things, but mainly focus on like personal finances.
A big thing obviously is that you're with this, when esports gaming and streaming really kind of blew up, everybody that was a part or could have been a CPA all wanted to have the gaming and esports clients. But the interesting thing I love about you is that unlike a lot of people who are like, they'll say that I'm a gamer, like you have the background, you are one, you know what I mean? And I really like that you can approach people and it feels legitimate. Because I know obviously, you can't start working with a CPA early enough. Like it's almost like this is something you're going to take seriously, you need to start almost right away. But in this day and age, it's like you got to make sure you're working with somebody who actually understands what the ecosystem you're a part of is, not someone who's just done it before. And I think it's great that you're someone who comes in with that knowledge for these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You definitely touched on it too. Like having those connections within the ecosystem to know what other people they need to talk to is always a huge plus. Yep. And that's something you only get by being involved with the industry itself. The only reason I know you is obviously because I work in this industry, same kind of thing. Being able to connect people with, financial planners that actually work with esports athletes or work with TikTokers or whatever random thing it could be, it's always good to have those kind of answers in your ecosystem and actually be connected to that industry.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely don't, because you have some CPAs that'll just be your CPA, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's how that CPA operates. I try to be a CPA, especially as you guys are saying in this industry, that's a value add. So like, yes, I'm your CPA, and yes, I'm going to do all that stuff for you, but I'd also like to be the person that can help you go a little bit further in your career. Or, like I was saying, if there's, like someone I know at a chair company and, you're in the midst of looking for that, and I think you guys might vibe well together, then, maybe that's an intro I make, and just being that connector for people in addition to obviously being their CPA. And then, on Justin's point, I think there's a lot of companies that say like built by gamers, and that's obviously great. It's good for the industry. I think sometimes we can milk that a little bit too much, but no, like I've Twitch streamed before. I'm an affiliate on Twitch. I enjoy playing video games, so that always helps. My podcast, I stream to Twitch. So there's different things that also help me like relate to my clients. Obviously don't do it to the level that they do, but it helps, create that small talk and have that connection.
Yeah, that like kind of by gamers for gamers tagline has always just been overused because the reality is just about everybody in the world plays some kind of game at this point. You know, like when I was flying up to Microsoft a few years ago, back before when you could do that, you know, back when you could get on a plane right now. I was sitting next to like an 80-year-old guy who's playing a flight sim, and then his wife next to him was playing Bejeweled or something. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's cool that you work in video games. Our kid loves video games. We don't do any of that." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You're playing a flight sim and she's playing Bejeweled." Like it's just one of those things where sometimes that gets lost. But like the thing for me that's really important about that aspect is that a lot of us like games, but there's something different to actually working in games, and there's something even more different to actually being a professional, like a CPA who has classifications and has rules and requirements that you had to do, you know, and things you had to pass to actually like prove that you know what you're talking about. Same thing with attorneys. You know, we've had to go past the bar. We've had to do all that. Had to graduate law school. I think it's definitely good to have a CPA or an attorney first, not just a gamer, you know, and then when you have one that knows your industry, that's the best part.
Yeah. And something I've always liked about you, obviously, even when we were starting A Prime, we had no shortage of CPAs in our inbox, you know, and you know that's just how it goes, and I get it. But the thing I liked about you and a few others, there's other few ones I really like too, is that you at least were going out and starting the conversations about this stuff and making sure that you're having conversations in public about this stuff with people, not just saving your business for the inbox. And that's something that I really, really have always appreciated about you, is that you've been willing to be out there and talk about it so people can find you and get a sense of who you are, and not just be that message that says, "Hey, I know you're into this thing. I am too. Want me to be your CPA?" It's like, it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think when I first stepped into, again, because like, you know, you guys are both saying we've all played video games. But when I first stepped into the industry almost 2 years ago now to look at it from a career standpoint and how I could, you know, provide value and work in the industry, I think I very immediately noticed, as we all know, that it's got to be authentic. You can't be, like you're saying, Justin, the person that just pops up in my inbox and wants to have a conversation because you think gaming and esports is $1 billion industry or something. Correct. So I really positioned myself early, especially when I wasn't a CPA yet. And I knew that was going to be coming down the road. I tried to just lay as much groundwork as I could to build those connections, to be able to create conversations, which is what led to the creation of the Lodgz podcast. Was, okay, I might not have any clients yet, and I might not be able to serve them how I want to yet, but at least let me have conversations with people in the space who do serve clients, who have worked and have experience and can provide value. And I always position that conversation to I never tried to be the one that was an analyst. I just try to bring people on, and I always kept the conversation on them and asking those questions towards them because they were the subject expert for that episode. And so yeah, that's always been important to me, and something I always try to continue to do.
So now that, I mean, I remember having conversations last year, you know, when all this stuff was really started, but now, and you were on your way to the career you have now. What do you feel is different from what you saw in the growth of last year into where you are now? What are you starting to see that really is a big difference from last year to this year?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously growth wise is just clients, and actually now like last year I began to help people a little bit with stuff where I could. But having just got my CPA a little while ago this year is where like it's become more of a thing now, because now I can fully serve clients in the way that I've wanted to since starting the company. And so it's just it's kind of funny because I've been thinking over the last few weeks, you know, obviously I left EY about 3 weeks ago where I had my day job there. And like, it's been funny, these last 2-3 weeks, I've almost felt like I've restarted the company again, because now it's like to where I can fully service people. And so the conversations are a little bit different. My involvement is obviously a lot more intense. And my days are more filled, obviously, as I'm full-time now. So it's probably just been the shift of side hustling last year and, you know, taking up nights, lunches, mornings to do what I could, to send emails, to have conversations, to now transition and be like, okay, this is full time. How do I fill out a whole day? How do I fill out a full work week and be efficient and productive with my time?
For sure.
No, I saw a comment from Marco in chat about how some of the best streamers are probably the ones who realize early on that they're running a business and they need to take care of all the things that businesses need to handle.
Correct.
And honestly, I can't emphasize enough how much it helps having experts in their areas able to kind of take the burden off you as you're scaling, because like even for me, I've had probably more tax classes than the average person, but I don't file my own taxes. I work with CPAs, like it's just one of those things where you can't be expected to know everything about everything. And for me, I've always been a little jealous of accountants because you guys kind of get to have the very easy sales pitch, in my opinion, of you owe the government $10,000. If you work with me, you only owe the government $4,000 and I'll charge you like $1,000. And then I'm over here on the legal end, like, well, you could theoretically owe $100 million or zero. And I don't know which number, like obviously that's a gross exaggeration, but like I have to kind of come at it from the risk avoidance perspective, whereas you get to come at it from the straight up, you're just flat out saving money, which is why from my perspective, I always tell people you need an accountant before you need anything else. You really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with whoever left the comment in chat. I don't know if I can see chat or not. And what you were saying, John, because I think still in my conversations that I have with certain streamers and content creators, there's the people that understand that they have to build a team around them outside of just, their moderators and their streamer and their graphic designer. And there's the streamers that, are kind of still hesitant towards that. And might be at that same level. And the differentiator, in my opinion, between a lot of the streamers that maybe 6 months ago were mid-tier and now they're higher tier is who did they put around them to take them to that next level? And that sounds so cliche, but like if you don't invest in the time to build professionals such as lawyers, CPAs, a banker, whoever that might be, a business manager that's a real business manager in gaming, not like your cousin that likes video games and has taken on your stuff. When you build that circle around you, as you guys know, and the people are doing successfully know, you're going to go to that next level. And I think sometimes that's where you run into a barrier of like some talent just either really gets it or some talent is still like hesitant. And it's trying to be authentic and come across in that conversation, be like, hey, like you have this potential. You just need to put more people around you though. Like you need to build a team around you and come at it from an authentic, viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because we all see and we all know it that a lot of these streamers, you're right, they put family members and friends into these really important business decision spots, but it comes down to trust. Like they just know that they can trust this person. And that's why I feel like, and every CPA knows this too. It's like they have to trust you. But I do feel like a lot of them just kind of come at it and go, "Hey, work with me." And it's like you got to build that trust first. They have to know that you're not just out for their money. Just like your job is to make sure that everybody else isn't out for their money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned business managers, which to me is one of those incredibly nebulous terms that, like you said, could be your cousin who maybe took one business class in college, or it could be literally like the greatest person on the planet,
Yeah.
But there's a huge difference there, and not necessarily always a really good way to kind of almost accredit that, because again, a business manager doesn't necessarily need to have professional classifications and stuff, and certifications. So that can get very difficult to kind of figure out who you can trust.
Yeah. So how do you, Juan, what is your approach? Because obviously streaming is a thing that, again, like you mentioned, people don't go in knowing that you really need to figure out the business side of it. And your job is obviously to come in and kind of convince them, look, you need to take this a little more seriously. What's your approach to that?
Yeah, I think explaining it like John, to touch off what John was saying earlier, is just explain to them like, hey, you're running a business. Some people are like, oh, it's a hobby turned business, but it's the faster, and it just comes down to that foundational point, the faster, especially if you're someone who's trying to do this full time and you're not just doing this, for giggles. The faster you can understand that and begin to set up your stream, quote unquote, like a business, is always the standpoint that I take. And that comes down to, if I want to talk on the tax side, like, some people made only a little bit and they started it last year as a hobby. And they're like, oh, well, I don't think I owe taxes on this money because of whatever reason. And then I come in, I'm like, okay, well, let me ask you a few questions. And then it turns out they do owe taxes on that money. And so that is kind of like a point that might be like, okay, see, this is why you need to build someone around you, because that money could sit there forever. You could have not paid taxes on it properly. You could have fines and penalties. And that's just one example on the tax side. Then if you look at the legal side, with talent, obviously they're signing, all these different agreements and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, who looked at your agreement. And a lot of the times it's something like, oh, my buddy who really knows how to read contracts very well, or something like that. And it's not a lawyer. I'm like, okay, well, your buddy probably didn't know how to analyze that contract and read through the clauses, to read through the exceptions, to read through this correctly. And you could be hurting yourself there. So it's not taking like a fear standpoint on them, but it's just taking it as like, hey, if you're serious about this, then you need to take these areas seriously. And again, going to my point earlier, I think the people that are going to excel in the industry as talent get that, or begin to get that very quickly. Whereas like other people want to feel like they can do it themselves, or oftentimes I feel like there's just a little bit of pride and arrogance that they want to do it all themselves. And that's just not the reality. And that's for any successful person, right? Like any successful person puts smart people around them, and it's just getting talent to understand that it's no different in their field.
Well, I mean, even just from a general basic economic understanding, there's this thing called opportunity cost. You know, there's a point where your time is better served elsewhere, and you're better off paying somebody else to do the work. You know, like it doesn't matter, even if you were, let's say, the one random unicorn who could do literally every task perfectly. You know, there's still a point where you only have so many hours in the day. You're better off not trying to be the person managing your books and letting a bookkeeper who is a professional at it, and probably a little quicker than you, to be honest, you know, take that over and handle it. Just move it off your plate.
Yeah. No, agreed. I forget what stream. I've gone back to this before with people, but I forget what stream I was watching. This was back in 2018. It was like, I think right when Fortnite was becoming very, very popular. And it was like the typical ninja stream. I think it was like Ninja Courage. And I forget what other two people. And it was kind of at that turning point of Ninja's popularity, where he was becoming very, very popular. And obviously his time was becoming more valuable. And I forget who was in that group with them. It was a squads Fortnite game. And the fourth person was mentioning the fact that they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is my streaming schedule. And then like for 2 hours, I'm doing like content creation and clip creation. And I like remember Ninja being like, why are you doing that? Like, why have you not hired somebody to do that? He's like, you're at the level where you don't need to do that anymore. And it's kind of like one of those people that obviously Ninja's had a very successful career outside of that Fortnite explosion. And I think it's because from a business standpoint, Ninja understood very early on, and obviously he had a long career prior to that. But in his popularity, he's one of those people that it clicked for him. Like, hey, like I'm at a point where I can't, like you're saying, John, spend time on this any longer, and I need to get someone else to do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So at what point would you normally tell somebody who is streaming that they should be talking to an accountant? Like, is there like a magic number?
I don't know if there's a magic number. I would say like my clients that I work with full-time throughout the year are full-time streamers. I think that if you're someone who's making a pretty good living from it on the side, and you're thinking of making that jump soon, then you should definitely talk to a CPA. I mean, honestly, the earlier the better. But again, like you don't need to be wasting a lot of time and money if you're only making a couple $100 from it, obviously. But I think that second you realize that you want to take this as a career, and like you're like, okay, 6 months from now is my goal to jump full time into this, and I want to be serious about it, I think then that's when you should begin to talk to a CPA to understand what it is that you need to do to put yourself in a position to succeed. And really to anyone that, whether they're a CPA or a lawyer, or they are a business manager in the space or an agent, and they get the industry, like just even having those calls and beginning to understand what it is you need to do.
I would, and again, I am not the business manager of this conversation, but I would assume also it's for getting to that level of streaming that like right when they get that partnership offer should really be the moment that they're like, okay, I need to make sure that things are starting to get structured correctly, because with the partnership contract, obviously different revenue opportunities come, different sponsorship opportunities come. Like it really starts to open a lot of doors, and it's almost at that point that if you don't have that to be figured out, what exactly is going to be happening with your money, you're gonna get messed up really, really fast.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And I think even before you're like at that partnership level or something, even maybe affiliate or something, there's things that are confusing just from a verbiage perspective. Things like the word donations, and the fact that we use terms like donations on Twitch, but Juan, you can tell everybody here better than anybody that those are not donations.
No. Yeah, let me not go on a rant about that because
No, you should. You 100%.
I'm 100% down.
I'm not joking. You
if there was a
should.
time to go on a rant about it, it's right now.
Yeah, I'll go on a rant real quick. I mean, listen, I've had too many conversations, whether it's through DMs, whether through it's someone that wants to hop on a quick call with me to ask me a few questions about their taxes. And it somehow comes up one way or another. And it's gotten to the point that I just ask because I want to make sure that this person is doing the correct thing. And donations comes up and they're like, oh, well, I didn't report donations last year. Like, I don't think I need to. And I'm like, and I try to go on to explain, listen, think of it as like a tip, like your donations are 100% taxable. I promise you that if you go into an IRS audit, you will not win that argument and you will definitely be taxed on that money. And the answer always is, and I don't know why, and like you're saying, John, I think it's just the how the word is used. Everyone's like, oh, well, my friends don't report it. Or, oh, I see tweets out there that says that I don't need to report donations. And again, is going to that underlying, topic that we've been talking about is like, okay, but who is actually saying that? Like, is this a CPA saying that? Probably not. Is it a streamer who's done well saying that? Sure. But that doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. And it's like, listen, I promise you that you're not you're not a 501(c)(3), you're not a charity organization. Your donations are not being just automatically sent to people in need or for a fund or for a reason. Like you are benefiting off of this money that is being donated to you. It is going to your personal financial gain. So it is 100% taxable. If you want to turn your eye the other way and say that it isn't because of friends, then again, it's just starting to get to that point of like, okay, then that's where you're not separating yourself to becoming a higher tier streamer because you're not listening to the people that you need to be listening to in that conversation, to put it blunt.
It's interesting too. That happens a lot. Obviously, the way information for these streamers gets disseminated is they all get opinions of their ecosystem. But I've had the conversation too, and it's like you don't see the person tweeting, "Oh, I didn't, claim my tips, and they hit me with a huge penalty, so I have to pay." Like they're not going to tweet that out. You know what I mean? Like that's just not going to be something you're going to find.
Well, yeah. In general, social media is always going to be curated to be the best.
Yeah.
It's your best hits. You know what I mean? You don't put the stuff that's the failures on there as often unless you're trying to,
Unless
literally
brand,
be like,
really.
unless it's your brand or you're literally like, look, this happened to me and I never want to see it happen to anybody else.
Right.
And unfortunately, from my perspective, I hear too many of the horror stories because I hear a lot of the bad stuff. You know what I mean? Like I hear about all the bad contracts people sign. I see a lot of the bad contracts and then tell people, please don't sign these, and try to help them fix them. But, even from the tax perspective, I've seen what can happen if you do that wrong. And it is not something you want to play with. The IRS is going to get its money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had, even like while we're on just the subject of taxing specifically, I've had potential clients come to me and be like, hey, like I haven't filed my 2018 and 2019 tax return. So I just figured I could start fresh in 2020. And it's just one of those educational moments where you try to be like, listen, like, no, like you need to go back. Do you have income from those years? Yes. Like you need to go back but it's just, again, you got to be really careful as talent as to who you're listening to in your inner circle, who you're listening to on social media, verifying your sources. Do people know what they're talking about? And again, I think that's just separates people and you just got to be careful when it comes to these things.
Well, and I think in general, everyone always assumes, okay, my goal is to pay the least amount in tax as humanly possible because that means more money for me. But the thing they're not necessarily thinking about is what if you want a house one day? What if you need to show income for a loan? Like if you've been somehow skirting by and showing like $7,000 of income, which hopefully you're not if you're actually a high-end earner, it's going to be hard. It's a very difficult process as a self-employed person to kind of show people that you're not a high-risk situation, especially when like let's use streaming, for example, a lot of your money is variable, or it may be from deal to deal. It may be completely donation based in a lot of ways. Even if it is subscription, which does kind of help pad it with a little bit more stability, you never really can guarantee that you're going to still have those numbers 6 months from now.
Yeah, and an interesting thing too is that we are the streaming thing and making it a career is so new that like we don't even have really examples of what an ecosystem looks like where there's retired streamers, like, and what they become after they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're not streaming anymore. And it's like, well, what happens next for them? And they obviously aren't thinking about that now, but this is now an occupation that if you're going to do this now, you have to start thinking, what happens when you stop doing this? Because a lot of people aren't, and that's a problem, I think.
Well, in a lot of ways, esports too, because when you think about what isn't a retired esports athlete, well, my first answer is going to be a streamer. You know,
Yep.
in a lot of ways, that's what the progression ends up being, because you realize like I can play less, I can spend more time with friends and family, and I can probably make decent money streaming because I already have the name recognition from whatever sport endeavor I was in. You know, and that just helps.
Yeah, I think having all of those conversations, all those things you just knocked on, because, and it's interesting, like you're saying, Justin, we really don't have like, we don't have these people in their 50s and 60s that have gone through not only the professional side or the talent side, and then post-talent side, and then retirement side. Like we really don't have that to look at yet. So it's difficult too from our end to like kind of like, consult talent sometimes and be like, hey, this is what you need to do, because they could quickly point to being like, okay, but who's done that? And so I think that just comes down to trying to understand the industry as much as you can, as complex as it is. But I think it's kind of an exciting thing about it too, because it's like we kind of are approaching like, in the coming years, what that will look like, and having the opportunity to, help that talent make those decisions. John, hit back on your cash flow side, because I think that's a really important topic, is like too, if you like, if you don't have your tax returns, you're not going to be able to probably buy a house. Like you're going to have those tax returns. And a lot of times, like I've seen, like I've heard through the vines, and I've seen where people want like a loan, and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm making like a really, really great amount of money, but I went to the bank and they denied my loan, or they denied my mortgage, and they don't understand why. And to your point, John, it's just because of the fluctuation that there is in so many of these people's income. And so that's where a lot of the times, like I'll bring in private banking, and I'll be like, listen, this is why you need to build a good relationship, whether you do private banking or not, at the bank, with someone that you can talk to there that can kind of understand, how does your industry, how does your profession work? How does your cash flow work? To where, you have someone that can back you, and you're not just going to a random bank and trying to get approved for a loan. And this bank has no idea who you are, what you do, how you make your money, and probably sees your income fluctuation. It's just like, what the heck? So,
well, ironically enough, when I first opened up my law firm, I was trying to get a credit card for the firm. The only one I could get it from is the people I've been banking with for the last 10 years. Because they're like, well, we at least know you're not like going to just disappear. And the problem was that year prior, I think I was streaming on Twitch part-time and studying for the bar. So I wasn't really working like crazy. That was probably my lowest earning income since I was 16. You know what I mean? So it was like a really weird year for me. So like when you're going to like a traditional bank that doesn't know you, they're like, yeah, no. Like just no, I'm not even going to keep reading. It's one of those things where honestly, it's probably getting flagged by the computer anyway before it even gets to the people, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So what are some of the mistakes that you commonly see streamers making when it comes to either spending or trying to do write-offs or stuff like that?
Yeah, with the write-off sides, I sometimes see, honestly, this sounds probably funny, but I sometimes don't see enough of it. Like I think a lot of the time streamers like are very closed-minded when it comes to what they can write off. And I can't tread too far here from, I got to be careful with what I say, but I mean, there's ways to get creative with write-offs that legally make sense, that from a tax perspective makes sense, that, you can do. And, obviously as a self-employed individual, you're going to get taxed on your net income. And I've seen people that just don't spend enough. And honestly, I've seen this in the last few weeks actually, is that there's just this misperception a little bit too of like, oh, I shouldn't spend a lot of money because I need to save all of my money. And so then you've got streamers that just aren't spending that much other than what they think are the core necessities. And so as a result, obviously their taxable income is like a lot higher than it should be. So it's getting to understand like, hey, obviously like don't go blow like half your money on just clothes that is for personal use, but let's be wise in how you spend business expenses and business purchases, because otherwise that money's just going, right back to the government. Or if you're not putting it in like savings and other deductions that you can take, it's just going to the government. So in the write-offs world, honestly, I just see sometimes just not enough things being bought. To stay on that topic real quick, the mistake then, if there is things bought, is there's just oftentimes a lack of documentation of what they bought. So a lot of times they won't have receipts for it. They can't find receipts for it. And there's just not great document retention. And so sometimes that can make things a little bit more dicey. You don't have as better records to go back on. You obviously always have bank statements and credit cards to go to. But just a lot of the times, like not keeping receipts is an issue that I see. So yeah, I'd say those two things on that side.
Can we talk about that a little bit more? Because I think that's actually something I see a lot of small business owners not do. And what's your advice on how to best handle that? Especially when it comes to something as monotonously boring as keeping receipts.
Yeah, so obviously like my perspective and take on it is, I feel obviously like I said, you can look at bank statements and you can see, okay, like this person spent $400 at Asus and they bought a gaming monitor, right? And we can trace that back to the bank statement line. My personal preference is I like to have the receipt and then also the proof that it cleared the bank. That's kind of like, the textbook is to say, okay, here's the money going out and here's the receipt for it. Here's the date for it, all those sort of things. I think it's a lot simpler than sometimes we make it out to be. You can have simple apps. You can literally, all your Amazon purchases. A lot of times streamers don't realize this, that they can go into their Amazon account for all the stuff they've bought. And there's literally Amazon, if you go to your invoices, just says print invoice and you literally print to PDF and you've got all your stuff there. So there's a lot of easy ways of just like, hey, when you spend the money, like just store it real quick, take 15 seconds, print it to PDF, snap a photo, put it in a, file and just keep up with it throughout the year. And your life will be so much easier.
Well, that's one of the beautiful things. I'll be honest, I use Amazon for almost everything for that reason, because it just makes my life easier. Because the thing people forget is, let's say you do go to Best Buy and buy like 6 items. Well, one might be equipment, one might be marketing, one might be, another category, and you have to categorize all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then 2 might be personal, So, you really need to like track all of that sometimes, that can it's one of those things where like I my fiance is self-employed and she just like, you tell her that and it's like that information paralysis all of a sudden. It's just like what you just don't want to deal with it all the time sometimes, but you need to. It's important.
It's interesting too, because obviously the streaming space is filled with a much younger demographic. Obviously there's bigger ones who are gotten to the 20s and 30s, but it's a younger person's game. And that also, I'm not gonna go into my rant about this, but it's like, it's almost as if it's like an educational thing too, because kids don't know much about how to do their taxes when they become 18, but they could be a successful streamer or esports player making 10 times as much money as they ever thought they would, but they were never told what to do with the money in the first place, So I also think that's another reason why I think the receipt thing and all them doesn't really matter, because from 15 to 23, you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about living your life. And now with the way the ecosystem is, you could be 16 sitting in your house and making a boatload of money. It's just a whole different game now. And I feel like the education system has to catch up to that.
Yeah, I think Justin, you've probably heard me, and John, honestly, you probably heard me go on. I like to put out a lot of financial literacy content. That's kind of been like a part of the brand of Lodgz, is the businesses I've grown it, is to put out that financial literacy content. But I completely agree, Justin. I think the education system's behind in this, and that like you don't graduate high school and you really have any idea how to run personal finances, what a credit card means, how to open a bank account, how to like at a very basic level file your tax returns. And yeah, sure, there's like a couple schools out there that offer like a personal finance class, but it's not the norm. And I think that's the issue. And so obviously, to your point, when you've got these kids that are younger and they don't get it, or they don't understand how complex some things can be too, is, I'll hop on a phone call and they'll be like, oh, I just have a few tax questions. and they'll ask the 4 questions and they think they're good. And I'm not bashing them. I'm just saying that they just don't know any better because they haven't been exposed to like, hey, like your taxes are a lot more than just answering 4 questions. Like there can be complexities to this. There can be levels to this depending on where you're at. And it's just trying to like get that to them and put that and educate them, like you're saying, a little bit on like, hey, this is the different things that could happen. Here's a little bit of this, here's a little bit of that. And I think as an industry, and I'm going to keep doing my part, is just putting out more of that content. I think that the younger generation, the kids that are in their teens right now, are receptive to it. It's just a matter of getting that content out there and putting it in a way that they understand it and can take it in.
Yeah, it's like you said, obviously in LinkedIn has no shortage of CPAs, but like these kids, they're looking at Twitter and YouTube and their other streamers for their tax information. And so it's like, if that's where it's at, then you guys who are dropping in everybody's inboxes, just start putting the content out there where those kids can see it, and they will find you. You know what I mean? They will look for you and find you. So, well,
and like the financial literacy, business literacy end of things is so important to me. Cause again, like I started creating content when I was 18. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing at the time. It's one of those things like, being a self-employed individual alone is weird to somebody who's not self-employed. So even though my parents are incredibly good about like introducing me to concepts like saving money and investing and everything else that could come into play very young, even they don't understand that, okay, a self-employed individual is going to pay taxes differently, and stuff like that. So I was very lucky that I got involved with people who knew what they were doing and could help me. And, like, that's why for me, it's kind of a personal thing. It's like, I want to help that next kind of generation coming behind and help create that content that they need to kind of succeed as well.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and we all know gaming. Everybody is a gamer. At the end of the day, for a lot of part, we all grew up playing video games at some point. So your demographic is far-reaching, and some people grow up with families that was taught and they get it, and other people's that's just not something that's available to them as they're growing up, and so they just don't know any better. And then part of it, I think, is just the school system too. To go back on that, so I think just the solution is to continue to just put out all the financial literacy content we can, and honestly just industry content on the do's and don'ts and how to navigate obviously what is the industry of gaming and streaming and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the way down to the high school level. If collegiate esports is going to be a thing, sure, they should have had this for all athletes, but I mean, like, these should all be a parts of these curriculums. Like, if you got an esports team, there should be somewhere in there those kids are going to learn a little bit about what it means to stream, what they do with their money. Like, these are all things that need to start being implemented. And
the nice thing is you see some of these things when it comes to, say, traditional sports, because the leagues have started working with the associations for the players to basically be like, we need to do some basic business literacy, financial literacy, as well as vetting the people who get involved in these spaces, that they know what they're doing and stuff like that. Because again, like, there's a lot of bad actors out there, and it's just very important that, they realize, like, hey, you need help,
Yeah. A lot of bad actors on LinkedIn specifically, but
yeah,
I see it on Twitter too. But
So the interesting thing, that what do you think needs to change in the next year? Because obviously esports and gaming in general and streaming has done this, like, it keeps evolving, it keeps changing, it keeps evolving. Where do you think is gonna be the next big thing for the next year, like, that we should pay attention to? Should it be that people should pay more attention to, like, the Twitch streaming deal and what that actually is, and what YouTube streaming deal offer? Like, what do you think the changes that need to start being to pay attention to?
Like the exclusivity deals,
all of it, yeah. Because right now we're getting to the point where YouTube is starting, in my opinion, to finally flex the muscle they should have been flexing for a year. But like, if they do the same thing that Twitch did, which is you have this partnership program, the kids don't even know what they're signing. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there needs to be more people out there being like, no, you just can't do that. You can't, just because you're the platform, you can't just convince these children to become partners on your platform, and they have no idea what they're signing. I feel like there's got to be legalities to that at this point.
Here's a crazy thing that really shouldn't be a secret, but sometimes I feel like it is. Not all partner contracts are the same.
100%.
flat out. Like
But they don't know
very,
that. You know what I mean? You can't just get excited to get that badge at this point, you know? So
I think I don't know if I'm answering this question because I think you go a lot of ways with that question, but
Yeah, I know.
I really do think it just needs to, and I think the biggest, I don't know, people have different opinions on maybe where the best gaming content, where everybody's at. I think there's a lot that goes on Twitter because I think that's where you have everybody. I think LinkedIn, you kind of just have the professionals. Instagram, you kind of just have like the streamers flexing their social stuff. So there's not really much educational stuff going on there. But I just think it's, again, just the content and the educational content and industry professionals that know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. And again, we're all learning as the industry expands. Like, you know, like the IRS really doesn't have like a whole lot of like specific things right now for streaming and this and that. So that could all change in an instant. And then, you know, someone like myself has to adapt. So I think it's just for the professionals to continue to change as it changes and to just put out more content. I think this year or last year, obviously we saw a lot of like streams going on, the conferences and all that. So hopefully like maybe more people that usually maybe couldn't afford to attend those events, attended it, got something out of it. Especially if you're someone maybe young and like, you're like, yeah, I can't fly to like, you know, this gaming conference, but I was able to watch it online for either free or a lot less. All those sorts of things. And I think there's a lot of good constructive conversation going on. And I think that at least in my experience, you know, I've only been like working in gaming for like 2 years now, is I think there's a lot more things that are being brought to light and being more transparent. And I think the more we can continue to bring things to light and have transparency, it helps the talent evolve. And then obviously as the talent evolves, as the teams evolve, as the leagues evolve, then everybody evolves. And so I think pouring into them and making sure that we're setting up an infrastructure that is going to last is obviously like ultra important for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, and another thing too, and you kind of hit it about seeing up too, is like we obviously need to have more of things being built from the ground up and not money up top and hoping that it builds from the bottom. You know what I mean? And I think once we get to the point where investment and all that stuff starts working with, let's try to build these things up and not just spend money at the top so everybody looks like we're doing successfully. We won't be successful until that starts to happen a little more, specifically in North America as well. So
I think too, from the, I mean, I don't know if this correlates. I think it correlates, but like, I think too, on professionals, like everyone, like I have financial professionals that hit up my inbox all the time and they want like client referrals. I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing for the talent to help
100.
them? Like, what are you bringing to the table that's going to help educate them more? Because if it's all just like if 90% of financial professionals are only coming to have clients and we don't have enough building it up from the ground up, like you're saying, and building that foundation, then, you know, we're never going to have enough right financial professionals in the space because there's not the right reason there, you know?
Well, I can just tell you, and I think you're probably echoing what I'm about to say, is that the people who hit me up the most cold calls in my LinkedIn mailbox are people trying to do financial planning, just 100%.
Yeah.
And the reality there is I like working with people like Jordan, for example, who's been on the show. I think you've met him one.
Yeah.
But he's actually trying to do stuff at a ground level. He's actually showing up, doing talks about video games and streaming and stuff like that. And it's nice seeing people like that who are trying to, again, build up versus just be like, hey, this sounds like it's a place that's got a lot of clients. You should send them my way, you know, but it's like, okay, but what value are you adding versus the other 100 people who just hit me up, you know?
Yeah. And it goes back to the trust thing. So the funny thing about this scenario, which is the scenario John just described, which is just people wanting to come and have clients, is the trust thing, like Justin was saying. And so I always tell financial professionals when they hit me up, and again, I feel like I'm gonna like egg on financial professionals. I'm just using it as the example. Yeah. Anybody that is just trying to get clients like in this manner is I'm like, what are you doing to develop that relationship? And so like you're saying, John, someone like Jordan or whoever else might be coming on podcast, putting out content, actually being able to create a name for who they are and how they can help the space, you know, take on a few like calls from people after you've established who you are and just genuinely help them. Not like, hey, I'll do a free 15-minute consultation, but like, I'm going to keep the good stuff for if you actually work with me. Like, throw out some wealth bombs to them. Like, let them know that like that they can have your trust, that like, okay, wow, like this guy didn't just, or this girl didn't just give me like just, you know, the very thin level. Like, they went deep with me and really like helped me out. And if you do that, I lost my thoughts. The funny thing is, if you do that, and if you actually invest that much and you build that trust, guess what? You're probably going to have a better chance of actually having a client base instead of just coming to other professionals in the space and asking for clients. That's just
and it's just a fact of the matter. You're 100% going to do better if you add value versus trying to take value. You know, you can go from the perspective of someone like Gary Vee, who's going to say like jab, jab, right hook. Give them something good, give them something good, then hit them up. You know, don't start from the start trying to get money off somebody, you know, but even then it's very clear when you're not being real about it, you know, or you're being kind of phony or transparent and just trying to, you know, kind of add value just to take still, you know, people, we're honestly in an industry, both of us, even though we have different roles, that is purely trust-based, you know, and at the end of the day, your reputation matters more than just about anything. So you've definitely got to do everything you can to protect that and build that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, gaming, streaming, all that, it's a very word of mouth ecosystem. Almost all of it is. There's very few things where people can just make their way in. You know, it's you kind of need to get validated by something else or somebody else that's already there. And so instead of trying to go right for the client, you just need to start doing the work and then letting those guys speak for you. That's really all it really comes down to. You shouldn't be throwing yourself out there. You should be doing good work so that they throw yourself out there. That's really all it comes down to.
Well, and I'm sure in a lot of ways it's going to be this way for you too, Juan. My clients are my best referral sources. At the end of the day, they're the ones going around singing my praises. I don't have to go stand on a pedestal and be like, look at me, because they're doing it for me, you know? And that's honestly what you want at the end of the day. You want to build that level of trust and that ecosystem to where people want to work with you, you know, and that's huge.
Yeah. I think building that trust, and like you're saying, word of mouth is huge for me. And I think that's something that I realized early, trying to just even like make a name for myself in this space, was that I knew that client referrals for a CPA, because it's all trust based. So you have to build relationships, and relationships take time to build. So there is no coming in here from a perspective like that and just landing a quick client, because, you know, John, you've become someone that I can trust as you and I have grown in our relationship and in our friendship. And there's been other people that I'd make referrals to because I can trust them, because too, on the flip side, I know that whether or not that referral goes well is also going to have an impact on my image and on how I represent myself. I'm not going to send a client to somebody that I don't trust, because if they do them wrong, now I can be looked at as the person that did them wrong. And that's obviously the last thing that I want to do.
100%. And that's why typically when I get those LinkedIn messages that are very clear, not to just like call anyone out, but they always say something along the lines of just like, I'm a blank, and you have a client base that is probably similar to mine. Let's work together. And I'm like, that's all you sent me? You didn't send me any kind of like, I don't know that you didn't just copy paste that, you know, like 150 times.
You don't want to be, especially if we're talking about if you're aiming after even like a mid-level gamer esports client, you don't want to be the person that the way you approach them, you're in their Discord later, they're talking about you going, here goes another one that was in my inbox again. You don't want to be that person. And I this is not to down anybody. There's obviously ways about this works. This is why people do this, you know, but for this ecosystem, if this is what you're trying to be a part of, that approach has to be, you have to evolve that, you know, it doesn't work the same way with these gamers and these streamers and this business.
See, sometimes I wonder if it even does work, or if it's just like a misunderstanding of what works.
It has to.
And then because it's the lowest effort thing you can do, people just do that instead of doing the thing that does work. Because like I'll talk to people and be like, I get client referrals a lot off LinkedIn. And then people will be like, oh, cool. So it's working. And then they go send out just blanket DMs to people. And I'm like, that's not what I meant. I meant I create content, and then I work with Justin, and I work with a guy named Stroop, and he edits video for me, and I pay him to edit video, and then I post it back up, and then I do talks at places like USF or FIU or other places I've been lucky enough to speak at, and that's what adds the value, not going up and cold calling people.
Well, it's approaching a different way too. I'm going to give an example of something that really worked for me for a different thing. But a guy, same thing, in my inbox, just gave me I think we could do something together. And I literally was like, dude, just give me your elevator pitch. I just sent that back. I was like, just give me your elevator pitch, whatever it is. And instead of just, again, because he did the whole, can I talk to you for 15 minutes thing that they all do. I was like, just give me your elevator pitch. Just tell me what it is you're offering me. And this dude made a personalized YouTube video that he sent me. He was like, here, this is my elevator pitch. And the video was like, hey, Justin, da 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 da. And I was like, you know what? I'll meet you. I'll meet you now. You've done something. You've put in the effort. You haven't made me have to get 15 minutes of my call to hear your whole pitch. You went out of your way to make sure you put in the effort, so I know who I'm dealing with already. That's the kind of stuff these kind of people need to do a little more of.
And I think go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say on the flip, because I know we've spent some time now just talking about how, I don't want to be like all negative, because obviously we need more people. I think on the flip sometimes, and I kind of felt this as I was trying to enter, but I think it's just you got to have persistence, but is that sometimes I think in gaming we can have a wall that is sometimes just too high to climb.
Correct.
And it's like, okay, we're not letting enough people, like there's a little bit of gatekeeping going on. And it's like 100%. We just want these people. And I think that we need to find happy medium of like, okay, if we want the industry to excel, if all of us want this to go further, I mean, more people have to come in. It's just a matter of how it is. But like you're saying, Justin, it's a matter of like, okay, but like, and it's hard. Like for me now having like relations with people who I think are valuable in the industry, I see it from that other perspective. And it's just like hard for me. Like, okay, who do I take a call from? Who do I not take a call from? Who do I give a little bit more time to? Who do I not give a little bit more time to? And it's hard on the giving side just as much as it is hard on the people who are actually trying to get into the industry.
Yep.
So I think just being mindful of that too, that like there are people that genuinely do want to be in the space. Yep. And like you're saying, hopefully they do something that sets them apart. And you're like, okay, this guy or girl, like they might actually mean something compared to the other people.
For sure. No, for sure. I 100% agree.
And people eventually reveal themselves out. That'll always be the
true
thing. Like if your intentions are real, it's gonna feel like it's real. When they're not, it'll well itself out.
Yeah, I 100% agree that just in general, gaming has a gatekeeping issue because the thing is, like, again, when I was saying earlier that older couple that was playing a flight sim and Bejeweled, they're gamers to me. Mm-hmm. But, to people on, say, Twitter, maybe not. You know what I mean? They're like, well, did you beat Dark Souls on hard? And it's like, you didn't even know that it had an extra hard mode or something. It's like, no, that doesn't, like, you're not a gamer, like.
Can your PC run Crysis? Get out of here.
Yeah.
I think we lost John. This happens.
Does this happen?
Now. Yeah, he'll be back.
Okay.
So I was interested with you, and I was, we've obviously at one point in time you did the thing where you were running tournaments and all that, right?
Yes.
You're trying that. Obviously, it's fan engagement. It's putting your name out there. Do you think these institutions should start to do more things like that? Like if you're gonna be in the gaming space, you need to kind of meet them where they are and not just cold call them. Like do you think we need to have more of that?
Yeah, I think so, and I think like when I ran that tournament. I that was still at a point because that was almost a year ago last year because it was right at the beginning of COVID. I remember it because the funds were for COVID. I didn't really have a client base yet. And so I said, okay, well, what can I do that will show that, even more so because I already have been doing like content. I was like, what else can I do to set myself apart to show that I want to be in this space? Yeah. And obviously anyone who runs a tournament knows that is a very difficult thing to do. 100. And that tournament, I think, had like 70 professionals in it. So it was a pretty big tournament.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you can do things like that, if other organizations, to get back to your question, can do things like that, I think eFuse does a good job of that right now with the tournaments that they're running, with the women's tournaments they're running, with the co-tournaments they're running, with the different things they're doing. I think they're meeting the gaming community, and that's why they're having the success that they're having, both inside and outside of the industry. I think having tournaments and events like that make the industry go further. I think it's beneficial. I think there should be more of it. I don't know.
It's like that approach is like, don't come to, if say you found the founder or CEO of any kind of business of a gaming thing, don't come to them and be like, how can we have you as a client? Be like, come with an idea of like what you want to show me that you're a part of this. Do you have a tournament? Do you have a thing? Do you have a talk? Whatever it is, like show me that you want to put effort into this and not just take this person on, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the times, and I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, like you get a 15-minute call and it's worded in the message of like, oh, I want to ask you or I want to pick your mind. But the reality is you're the one doing all the talking, and it's almost just like you're doing just like this free giveaway of like everything. Yeah. And then that person, once they get enough of them, and this is how I think sometimes then we get the wrong people in the space, is they get enough of those, and then they can begin to kind of manipulate it and be like, okay, now I've had this conversation with so-and-so. Or I've seen the other thing where someone will follow like a bunch of people and connect with a bunch of people so that when they connect with you, it shows like 200 mutual connections. But like you're saying, it's all surface level because I can go see the work you've actually done. So like you're saying, what's that work you've done, whether it's a podcast, whether it's events, whether it's articles, like there's a lot of things I think you can do to bring value and to show that, you want to be in the space.
And I say that even for, and we're talking about, more financial professionals here too. It's like, if you're having people in your firm approach these guys, and something you might need to do is invest a little bit into somebody who does things like puts on events or like don't just send your CPA out there to find these guys. You know what I mean? Like, let's maybe have someone whose job is to build something that these people find you, that's where you should find that investment.
Right.
I'm really not trying to make the computer thing into a meme where it keeps dying on me.
I told him, I was like, this happens.
But since I do have my accountant on the phone here, I can write off a replacement, right? Because like this is causing work issues.
It seems to be causing a bit of an issue.
Yeah. I have some thermal paste actually that I meant to put on there, and apparently I forgot. So it doesn't really do any good when it's still in the box. So I think it needs an update from the last time I added this. So see if I can actually do this after instead of forgetting again. Yeah, no, I think this is the third one in the last like 5 that I've had this issue. So it's like sometimes you just got to spend the money on things that are going to help the business,
Exactly. There you go. Prime example, real-time example here.
Dude, real-time examples are some of the best ones.
They are.
Little better when it's not like borderline embarrassing because I'm trying to write out a 2014 PC until GPU prices get out of COVID range, because right now they're just absurd between the fact that people are using them for mining, the fact that COVID is a thing, the fact that, again, they just came out last fall, I'm just hoping to write it out a little bit longer to get something a little bit better for a little bit cheaper, but it's one of those things where I'm going to have to bite the bullet and just spend it.
I specifically built a brand new computer at the beginning of 2021 that I haven't even touched yet because I'm waiting for this one to kind of really. This is a powerful built one from 2017, and I'm like, I'm just gonna ride this one out for a little longer before I even turn that one on.
Yeah, no, this one was good when I bought it. Like I spent a decent bit on it, and a buddy of mine at Microsoft like picked all the parts for me. But like, it's on its last legs. It's pretty sad. Probably doesn't.
Do you know Paradox, John?
At this point, the game company or who?
No, his Twitter goes by Paradox. But
I don't.
Okay, he builds some pretty cool PCs. So if you want a new PC soon, you should see what he's building. I don't know if you like to build your PCs. He is New York.
Oh, okay.
You think Corneal over in Orlando?
Yeah, I know Corneal.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Corneal's over there.
Yeah, you introduced me to Corneal. He's a good dude.
Yeah. Shout out Corneal. He's doing.
I might need him to come look at mine because I finished this PC, but I feel like someone needs to go in there and make sure I put everything in the right place because I haven't turned it on because I've been afraid that maybe I put one cord in the wrong spot and I'm afraid to see the whole thing. So,
that's so funny.
Yeah.
His work is very interesting. I think it's cool what he's doing.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I mean, I think. I don't remember where you guys were while I was gone, obviously, but
we're at the top.
Right when I died, I was just sitting back saying, I agree with you that, gatekeeping is a thing and we need to kind of do what we can to kind of help more people be able to be available to this space, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's also one of those things where because of the fact that you have seen, or at least I've seen people with bad intentions, it does make you want to find a balance.
That's the problem with the gatekeeping is that it's almost understandable why it exists, you know.
Yeah.
But there's also it's a one maybe level too high that it needs to come down
Yeah.
just a little bit.
Well,
but because there is still a level of people that we've been letting people kind of parade around when we should be like, all right, well, you're not doing this anymore. You need to get into it, you know. So
well, and there was like a full year where I swear everybody on the planet just put the word
my God.
esports on their profile, you know, and there's really no proof that you do anything with esports when you do that, you know. So.
There was people that I could not find other than on their LinkedIn profile and I'm not going to say titles or anything, but that's all they had. And I literally couldn't find a piece of work they had touched. And I'm like, I don't know how you're getting this attention. I don't know the algorithms. I don't know what's happening. But
and
this
just
is honestly, this is why I stopped posting a lot more about stuff on LinkedIn, was because all I was seeing was a lot of people who didn't have much having a lot of say, and I'm just like, well, I want to talk to people who are doing the work, not the people that are talking about the people doing the work, you know.
Well, just to kind of wrap everything up, I feel like you know, again, if you're a streamer or an esports athlete out there looking for help, look for what people are doing, what kind of content they're producing. You know, look at who they know and who they work with and what their client list looks like. Get some referrals, talk to some clients, you know, that they have worked with. You know, there's plenty of information out there for you to figure out, you know, who you can trust and who out there is doing good work, you know. And then honestly, from my perspective, please get an accountant. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to give you a hard sell here, Juan, because like at the end of the day, everybody out there, I don't care who you are, if you're making money, you need to make sure you're tracking it right, you know. And the moment you start getting into kind of business range where it's no longer just kind of a hobby, you definitely got to be careful with it. And even then, when it is a hobby, if you're making like 10 grand on that, you better be smart about saving for your taxes and preparing for it. So
even influencers, like, they don't even get into it either. Like, they make money off deals, and you're like, you should be paying more attention to this.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I feel like we could have had another hour conversation. We haven't even really touched it on
I feel like we did.
How do you plan for, you know, the fact that you have a variable income, but you're trying to write more stuff off, and you've got to just be smart about your planning, you know. And that's an area where that takes some expertise, you know. It's
estimated
right.
Estimated taxes are fun with streamers because they could kill it 1 year, or they could kill it for 6 months, and then they could dial it back a little bit for 2 and then kill it again. And it's just like, y'all are making me have a lot of fun over here with your estimated taxes and how much we should put away, how much we shouldn't, how should we make sure you don't get hit with penalties. But yeah, it's very, very fun. It's unique. I enjoy it.
You do seem like you enjoy it, which makes a difference, you know.
I do. As much as I joke about how annoying it is, like I kind of like doing it. So
well, I'm sure you have a similar perspective to me because, I mean, again, it is fairly new. So it's kind of cool to be working on something that is a little more cutting edge in some ways. And again, running into new issues is fun because you kind of add a new weapon to your utility belt every time. Because it's one of those things where, you know, like the first time I did an ADA compliance letter for a company to kind of help them get a waiver on whether or not they needed an elevator, I was like, that's weird. That's not in my wheelhouse. But now I'm like, okay, now it is, you know, like there's random things like that you never expect you're going to run into. But once you do, it's like, cool, that's a new thing I know how to do now, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I hit you up the other day. I was reading through tax treaties, and, you know, here I am reading through tax treaties, and that was a new one for me because of how the nature of this client. And, you know, it was a little frustrating, but you know what? It's a learning experience. It's something else like you're saying to add, you know.
Perfect example of why when I had another client pop up who has some people overseas, I'm like, well, Juan's already dealing with some of this. Let's see if he wants to do it again, you know.
True.
But thank you so much, Juan. For anybody who is watching who wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, you can shoot me an invite here on LinkedIn, like shoot me a message. On Twitter, I'm at Lodgz, so Lodgz. My DMs are open on Twitter too. So I think my DMs are open everywhere. So you can shoot me a message there. And yeah.
Yeah, that honestly is my biggest advice to somebody wanting to work with streamers is keep your DMs open because they don't like to send emails. Like
Yeah, no.
I work with more people through Instagram and Twitter than I ever expected to. Just because
Have Discord. Just have
Discord
it, you know what
too.
I mean? Yeah.
Yes, please have
You don't have to
Discord.
start your own thing, but just have it. You know what I mean? You don't have to have your own server, but just have Discord.
Absolutely. If that's a differentiator. Have Discord. Agreed.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much and later.
Thanks, guys.